For over 6 centuries, one empire dominated 3 continents and became one of history's most powerful and longest-lasting dynasties. But how did a small Turkish principality grow into a global superpower, and what caused its dramatic collapse? This is the extraordinary story of the Ottoman Empire. At the end of the 13th century, a Turkish nomadic chief named Osman I led a small band of warriors in the region of Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. Osman's father Ertugrul had already established a modest power base, but it was Osman who saw an opportunity. The powerful Seljuk dynasty was crumbling under the pressure of Mongol invasions, leaving a power vacuum that Osman and his warriors exploited through a series of raids. These warriors, called Ghazis in Arabic, were fierce and determined. They seized control of Byzantine towns along the Sakarya River and expanded their territory year after year. What began as a small principality would eventually become an empire that stretched from the gates of Vienna to the Persian Gulf. The early Ottoman leaders continued Osman's aggressive expansion. His grandson Murad I established the empire's military and administrative institutions, creating a more formal state structure. By the early 15th century, the Ottomans controlled much of the Balkans and Anatolia. Then came a moment that would change everything. In 1453, a young sultan named Mehmed I launched a siege against Constantinople, the ancient capital of the Byzantine Empire. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople had stood as a symbol of Christian power in the East. The walls that had protected it for centuries finally fell to Ottoman cannons and warriors. Mehmed Tiku, who would become known as the Conqueror, captured the city and made it the capital of his empire, renaming it Istanbul. This victory marked the official end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's most glorious period. The conquest of Constantinople transformed the Ottomans from regional powers into a world superpower. Istanbul became a thriving center of trade, culture, and art. Scholars, artisans, and merchants from across the Islamic world flocked to the city. The empire continued to expand under Mehmed's successors. By 1517, Sultan Selim I had brought Syria, Arabia, Palestine, and Egypt under Ottoman control. With these conquests came control of the Islamic holy cities of Mecca and Medina, giving the Ottoman Sultan immense religious authority. He became the Caliph, the spiritual leader of Islam, elevating the empire to unprecedented power and prestige throughout the Muslim world. The Ottoman Empire reached its peak under one of history's greatest rulers, Suleiman I, who reigned from 1520 to 1566. Western rulers called him Suleiman the Magnificent, while his own people called him Suleiman the Lawmaker. During his reign, the empire experienced what historians call its golden age, a period of unprecedented power, stability, and cultural flowering. Suleiman expanded Ottoman territory into Hungary and the Balkans, nearly reaching the gates of Vienna. He established the Ottoman Empire as a dominant naval power, capturing Algiers and Tripoli and controlling much of the Mediterranean Sea. Beyond his military conquests, Suleiman created a uniform legal system that brought stability and order to his vast realm. He welcomed artists, poets, architects, and scholars from across the Islamic world and made Istanbul the cultural capital of the Muslim universe. At its height, the Ottoman Empire at the time contained approximately 25 million people and stretched across 3 continents. The reign of Suleiman saw an explosion of artistic and architectural achievement unlike anything seen before. Thousands of skilled artisans worked on grand projects throughout the empire, contributing to a cultural renaissance. The Suleiman I Mosque, designed by the legendary architect Mimar Sinan, became one of the most stunning religious structures ever constructed. The mosque's massive dome and 4 slender minarets rose majestically over Istanbul's skyline, inspiring awe in all who gazed upon it. Sinan, who had been trained as a military engineer, designed hundreds of buildings across the empire, from elaborate mosques to hospitals to caravansaries serving traveling merchants. Ottoman craftsmen created magnificent ceramics, especially the famous Snik tiles, which featured intricate patterns and vibrant colors that decorated mosques and palaces. Calligraphers produced exquisitely beautiful manuscripts of the Quran, while miniature painters captured scenes of court life, battles, and important events. Musicians composed classical pieces performed at the royal court, and poets wrote verses that celebrated the empire's greatness and power. The palace alone employed nearly 900 artisans in various crafts. Ottoman architects and engineers were remarkably advanced for their time. They built hospitals with separate wards for different diseases, establishing some of the world's first specialized medical facilities designed with healing environments. Ottoman physicians invented surgical instruments like forceps, catheters, and scalpels that are still used in modern medicine today. Medical schools provided both theoretical and clinical training to future doctors. Scholars made significant contributions to astronomy, observing the heavens and mapping stars. Mathematicians advanced the field with new calculations and theories. Geographers mapped the known world with remarkable accuracy. The empire's legal system was so impressive that even European rulers acknowledged its sophistication and fairness. For a brief moment in history, the Ottoman Empire represented the pinnacle of Islamic civilization and stood equal or superior to any European power of the age. By the end of the 16th century, the Golden Age had begun to fade. After Suleiman's death, his successors lacked his vision, leadership, and military prowess. The empire's sprawling bureaucracy became bloated with corruption. Government officials enriched themselves while neglecting their duties and responsibilities. Powerful military factions competed for control of the capital and the throne itself. Sultans increasingly became prisoners in their own palaces, manipulated by advisors and court factions. The Janissaries, the elite military unit that had once been the empire's greatest strength and most feared warriors, became more interested in maintaining their privileges and wealth than defending the realm from external threats. At the same time, European powers were changing the world in ways that threatened Ottoman prosperity and dominance. The age of exploration brought Portuguese and later Spanish ships around Africa and across the Atlantic Ocean, discovering new lands and wealth. These new maritime trade routes meant that merchants no longer needed to travel through Ottoman, controlled lands and pay Ottoman taxes. The empire's trade revenue, which had always been a crucial source of wealth and power, began to decline dramatically. Meanwhile, European nations were undergoing the Industrial Revolution, building factories and mills that produced goods far more efficiently than anything the Ottoman Empire could manufacture. The Ottomans remained an agricultural empire in an age of industrialization, a fatal weakness that only grew worse with every passing decade and generation. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, the Ottoman Empire contracted significantly. Russia, which had emerged as a formidable rival under strong leaders, defeated the Ottomans repeatedly in a series of devastating wars. The Ottomans launched their final siege of Vienna in 1683, hoping to conquer this jewel of Central Europe. But the city held firm against the assault. After this failure, the empire relinquished Hungary and continued to lose more territory to rising European powers. By the 19th century, Tsar Nicholas I of Russia called the Ottoman Empire the sick man of Europe, a phrase that captured the world's perception of Ottoman decline and weakness. The empire lost most of its remaining European territories to independence movements and nationalist rebellions. The Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913 shattered the myth of Ottoman invincibility and military superiority, and the empire lost nearly all its remaining European lands in these crushing defeats. When World War I erupted in 1914, the Ottoman Empire made a pivotal decision to join Germany and Austria, Hungary against the Allied powers of Britain, France, and Russia. It was a catastrophic strategic error that would seal the empire's fate. The empire lacked the industrial capacity to manufacture enough weapons and ammunition for a prolonged global conflict. Ottoman armies were stretched thin across multiple fronts, from Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean to the Caucasus Mountains. The war drained the empire's already depleted resources at an alarming rate. The Ottoman economy, weakened by decades of decline, could not sustain the enormous financial burden of modern warfare. In 1915, the Ottoman government ordered the deportation and massacre of Armenians, an atrocity that would haunt the empire's reputation for generations and cost the lives of over 1 million people. By October 1918, the Ottomans had been decisively defeated by Allied forces, and the war machinery ground to a halt with the Armistice of Mudros. The end came with surprising speed after the war concluded. The Treaty of Sèvres, signed in 1920, would have partitioned Ottoman territory among the victorious Allied powers of Britain, France, Italy, and Greece. The treaty aimed to reduce the Ottoman state to a fraction of its former size. But Turkish nationalists, led by a military officer named Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, refused to accept this complete humiliation and subjugation. He rallied the Turkish people and launched a determined war of independence against the occupying forces. After fierce fighting from 1919 to 1923, the Turkish nationalists prevailed against overwhelming odds. The occupying forces were expelled from Anatolia, and the Turkish national movement established firm control over Asia Minor. On November 1, 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate was formally abolished by the Grand National Assembly of Turkey. The last Sultan, Mehmed VI, fled Istanbul aboard a British warship, ending his family's rule that had lasted over 600 years. The following year, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk declared Turkey a modern republic and implemented sweeping reforms that transformed the nation into a secular state. Though the Ottoman Empire fell in 1922, its legacy remains powerful. The empire's architectural marvels still stand in Istanbul, Cairo, and cities across the Balkans, drawing millions of visitors each year. The Blue Mosque and Topkapi Palace remain symbols of Ottoman greatness. Ottoman calligraphy, miniature painting, and ceramics continue to inspire artists around the world. The empire's legal traditions influenced modern legal systems in Turkey and the Middle East. The Ottoman millet system, which allowed different religious communities to govern their own affairs, became a model for managing multi-ethnic societies. The Ottoman Empire demonstrates both the heights that human civilization can reach and the forces that can bring even the mightiest powers to their knees. For 600 years, it brought stability, cultural richness, and artistic achievement to 3 continents. Yet it ultimately could not adapt to a rapidly changing world.